let's talk about how incredible Act 1 of 28 Years Later is. We arrive on this island, the Holy Island, which is a real island, actually, and it has a causeway in real life as well, where when the tide gets low, you can walk across, and when the tide is high, you cannot. And this is what makes this island so special for those that are a part of a global operation to quarantine essentially the UK from the rest of the world because they have the virus. So they're under a necessary quarantine. No one gets in, no one gets out. And on this island, because of their protection from this causeway and from the tide, they're able to thrive. And they build almost this utopia, right? To some. They have this cute little community, they share resources, they go on to the mainland and they hunt and they gather more stuff and come back. And the story that we follow is actually this one character, Spike, and his father. And in Act 1, they go together on his very first journey to the mainland. He's 12 years old. They prefer, as a community, if children wait until they are 15 or 16. However, Spike's father believes that Spike is ready. Now, let's talk about why. We're going to break it down in this act. You really start to see the themes of masculinity being played out. This idea that Spike is ready when he's 12 is one of these problematic masculinity elements, because he goes into this situation by the behest of his father, who is currently kind of being emasculated in his marriage. He has a wife who is just such an excellent performer and so beautiful, and I love her, who is experiencing memory issues. She can't really follow time very well. There's not a lot of continuity. She is sometimes thinking that she's hallucinating, or that there's different people in the room, or that things that never happened, or things that happened didn't happen. It's confusing. And in this marriage, the man, right? And in this community, there's very much a man and a woman in a relationship, right? Is having to watch this happen helplessly, and that is very emasculating. And they don't really spoon feed you that, this emasculation is 100% the reason that he wants to take his son to the mainland. But it's kind of obvious. There's this darkness to this character that especially we see in the transition from Act 1 to Act 2. But even if you see the darkness, what really comes out and what makes me feel like this coming of age story is so rooted in what it means to be a man is that he takes a lot of pride in being the person that goes to the mainland to gather stuff. And he also takes a lot of pride in being a father. And he really feels his best and feels the most manly and the most powerful when he is fighting the infected and when he's bringing things back to the community. And he wants to involve his fatherhood in that experience. It does seem super fun. It seems really connective. And it's not until later in the story that we start to realize that this passion that he has for that might actually be something that's really toxic and is a toxic coping mechanism for the world at large and what the world has become. But for now, what we see is this beautiful village with gardens and a little shack where you can share your stuff, and a lot of communication. It does have this very retro vibe. And a lot of the themes in this movie are about this kind of Brexit, Make America Great Again idea where people look into the past and they believe that it was better. And so they want to go back to that, right? When everybody was more oppressed and there was only one kind of person that it could exist. And, there's a lot of problems with thinking that way. But in this community, they are almost protected by the violence and carnage and chaos that surrounds them because they have this causeway. They have no external modernity or technology to influence their development. So they are able to keep their nose to the ground, live in these gender roles, not question it, because it's what's working for them and their community. Is it a little strange? Yeah. Does it give you this kind of weird cult vibe? Yeah. When I first started watching it, I almost wondered if there was some kind of sinister secret problem with this place, like one of those places that looks so great on the outside, and on the inside they're like keeping people in the basement and, eating them and taking out their noses or whatever. So that's kind of the vibe. That's like the energy that you're getting. Is like, yes, everything is perfect, but what is underneath all of that? And then when he is taking his son to the mainland, everyone is cheering them on. They say, good luck, Spike. We're so excited for you. They even set up a party for him to return to. And what I think is really interesting is that we don't see a lot of iconography when they're on their way out, but on their way back in, when they're having some issues getting back home, you start to see the iconography that the island has, which, it's not 100% representative of their religion, but they have these masks that are supposed to be like the infected. They have, these sunken cheeks and this big gaping mouth, like the zombies when they make that noise. They have blood on them. And in these, creative moments of kind of flashing to and from different scenes, you occasionally will pick up that mask and you almost wonder what that is. Well, as they're coming back from their journey, you see what it is. It's this kind of ritualistic representation of the infected that they have around that is supposed to normalize killing them. And even on the dummies that they shoot with arrows, those masks are there as well. So all of that to say, they're on their way out. Everybody's setting up a party. You can start to see how, their kind of connectivity and spirituality and community is kind of based around this ritualistically. And it is it's a coming of age, what do you call it when they have like a ceremony? I can't think of the word. Gunther, where's my pen? This initiation does mean a lot to the community, and it doesn't seem as if Spike is going to be the only person, like the first or the last, but we are zoomed really in on this story because his so it is kind of initiation. It's a rite of passage for someone to go to the mainland for the first time with their bow and arrow and give it a shot, so to speak. So they're leaving the island, and the woman who's guarding the gate says, you know, once you go, if you don't come back, we don't send for rescue. And there's, these graves all around the gate representing the people that they have lost trying to rescue others. And it does go to show that while this is a very tight-knit community, there are elements of individualism and isolationism that they have clung to in order to survive, in order to prevent loss of further life, in order to try to limit the amount of grief that they have to deal with when they lose someone. So they go across the causeway. He says they have 4 hours. They run into these slow zombies that are fat and crawling. And the first thing that I noticed that I thought was really smart was that the zombies are nude because, of course, their clothes would by now have been completely rotted off. That's not true for all of the zombies. There are some elements of like tattered clothing here and there, but for most of the zombies, their clothes have rotted off. You can see their cock and balls. You can see their bare butt. And these first, fatties that we see are not able to move very well. And so they're an easy shot for Spike. And he goes on his way to get them. He is really scared. There are so many, as we're getting introduced to this town, there's a lot of different kinds of shots from not just the people working in the town, but also what look like medieval archers that are shooting arrows, and then also what look like kind of 1920s to 40s military people. And this is kind of illustrating this overarching theme, and we see it a lot in the first act, these kind of flashes to, the boots marching on the ground, the medieval knights shooting the arrows, and then sometimes occasionally in the scenes with the infected, we'll also get kind of a glimpse of that. And it's representing this theme of there being a simpler time, but it's also showing that some of the times that we believe are quote unquote simpler are times of war. It's showing that there is a way that we as human beings will create community around and attachment around this trauma of war and pain and violence, and how it does bring people together for better or for worse. It creates communities, it creates militaries, it creates these stories that people get to have in their world about a time when people came together. But in reality, they came together because of something violent and unnecessary and traumatizing and inappropriate. So we're seeing that as we go, but we also get these scenes of the infected, and it's on this kind of like red night vision frame, and the eyes are glowing and they're just kind of growling in the dark. And I think that's really smart. All of that to say, when we have this first kill and we have this first interaction with the infected, and of course you remember from the prequels that there are very fast infected zombies, and that it is quick and dangerous business to try to take them on or to try to outrun them. In this case, you see that they're starving. They don't have a lot to eat. This infected here is eating worms out of the ground and is hardly able to move. What's curious about that is you almost wonder, like, are there still these fast ones? What is it going to be like when we actually get to them? Is this as far as we're going to go on this trip to the mainland? And the answer is no, because we keep going deeper and deeper. We do end up encountering some faster zombies, infected, not zombies technically. And we do end up encountering some, like a shelter that Dad and Spike go into, where they find a body hanging from the roof. It's disgusting and terrifying. And as we'll talk about in the third act, there is also a name carved into that body, which is Jimmy, right? And we visit Jimmy later, and that includes the opening scene where we have Jimmy running from the zombies. All of that is in the Act 3 recap, because if you've seen it, Jimmy comes back to see us. And what's really scary about this part, there's so many jump scares, but we see that Spike is hesitating. And it's like any idea that you as the viewer have, any confidence that you have in Spike being able to get his shit together and be able to shoot the infected when he needs to with an arrow, is totally obliterated by this experience where he cannot shoot until it's almost too late. It's really terrifying. And so you see his humanity, and then you start to realize, like, oh yeah, he's way too young. Like, he should not be out here, even with his father. When they're in a situation where they're running from the fast infected, you really think that the dad's gonna die protecting his son. Like, they almost tease at any minute, Spike could lose his guardian. And I think that's what's really beautiful about the first act, is that you don't really know. Of course, you're kind of getting that Spike is the protagonist, but you're actually not 100% sure who's going to live, who's going to die, and what this business is on the mainland. And what's a huge relief is after all of that, after A stampede after running into an alpha, which these alphas, let's just talk about it while we're here. They are theoretically reacting to the virus like steroids. They have huge cocks. So if you had any ideas about how this movie may not actually be about masculinity and toxic masculinity and what the pressure of an apocalypse would do to masculinity as we know it in our culture today. If you had any illusions about that, then all you have to do is look at these alphas, because they are these big men that tear the heads off of people, including their spine, and their cocks are just flapping, thumping against their thighs as they run, and they're in your face. And you can leave behind any illusions that we're not talking about masculinity in this film at that moment specifically. And of course, it's really scary because there's only two of them, right? Even a team of people it might take to take an alpha down, which we see later when they have, they took shelter when they were being chased. The building collapsed because of the stampede, and so now they're having to run back to the mainland as fast as they can, and there's an alpha chasing them. And talk about style. I mean, yes, we're getting these stylistic deaths, blood, gore, squelching, splattering, the disgusting sound of the infected as they're chasing and trying to eat. Very fast, very quick, very strong, very, feelings of helplessness. And then, speaking of style, they are running down the causeway. It is shallow, but the tide is not all the way low. They feel like they've made it because they're on the causeway. And there is a beautiful sky. And just think about the sky without light pollution. I mean, gorgeous, multicolored, so many stars. There's, you can see the galaxy, right? And in the midst of this, they see the beautiful night sky. They're starting to relax because they're walking across the causeway. They can see their beautiful, idealistic village in the distance. And then the alpha is running after them, fast, splashing, right? Spike is falling. His dad is dragging him. And they have no ability to take down this alpha. And even, as they're screaming, because of course the night watch at this, little village is like totally complacent by this time because it's been so long since they've had to encounter the infected. They're asleep. So Spike and his dad are screaming, right? The complacent, sleepy night watch are waking up, trying to hit this alpha with arrows. Nothing is taking him down. They finally get a red hot, flaming, thick, phallic arrow to hit him. And he finally is down for the count, right? We still don't know if he's going to get back up as the viewer. And neither does the woman who is, designated with letting them in through the gate. So she has to wait at least 28 seconds to see whether or not. And it is just so tense. Such a beautiful, intense chase scene. Then we get to this party where they're celebrating Spike, and it's so funny. They started the party without him, like they're supposed to be coming back when the tide is down and it's nighttime, like they're all drunk, and his father starts telling a story about Spike having taken down all of these infected when Spike knows very well he couldn't get a headshot. He couldn't do it when they were actually running at him. He was too scared. This is another window into that narrative about what masculinity becomes under pressure. And in this case, it's lying. It is creating a narrative that isn't real. It is blowing up something that would otherwise be an invitation for connection and learning and making other people feel better. And at the end of the day, one of these things that this community is totally insulated from is the reality that the infected are faster, stronger, more equipped to kill them, and they have just gone so long without having to confront it that, yeah, something like hearing that, Spike went out young and he couldn't do it would scare them quite a bit. It would create a situation where they no longer had that kind of confidence that they had beaten out the infected, that they were really protected, when in reality, it is that causeway is a very thin line between a breach and not a breach, right? In the midst of all this, Spike does see his father cheating on his mother. And I think this is when we see there's different kinds of initiations, right? There's the ones that we go through in our culture, and then there's the ones that happen within us. And I think that Spike witnessing that is when the initiation happened within him, and he realized, like, not only is my father willing to lie to this community, he's also willing to lie to me. He's willing to be unfaithful to my mom. And then really what totally erodes any trust that Spike had left in his father is when he confronts him and he's slapped in the face. And that is an act of violence, and that is what completely splits him from his father, is that he understands that his father is a violent person because he has to be. And what Jesse has internalized is that violence is the reaction. That whenever we are threatened, we respond by causing pain in the other person. And it's like a reaction that you would see, in someone with PTSD from war, right? He loses control of his body and he slaps his son hard. And then now the son has immediately flipped from feeling as if he's being protected by his father to feeling as if he has to protect his mother from his father, because he's just been witness to his violence, and he's starting to understand, like, what this man is capable of is not what I originally perceived. This is all wrapped in with this knowledge that there is a doctor that may be able to see his mother, Isla, for her memory issues. She has these bouts of rage. I honestly thought at the beginning of the movie, because her first kind of reaction is like throwing things off of a nightstand, I was thinking that she had some kind of like, maybe like immunity to the virus, kind of in the way in the second movie how that person was infected but she wasn't like raging. I was kind of thinking it might have been something like that. It ended up being a lot more mundane than that, as we talk about in Act 3. But when they're out in the mainland, Spike sees a fire in the distance, and his dad lies and says he doesn't know what it is. But his grandfather, I think it's his grandfather, some old guy in their house, says that it might be the doctor. So he gets the story out of his dad that there is a doctor. The doctor has gone insane because he's lining up all of these bodies and burning them. Now, I honestly thought, like, that's not a good enough story. Like, when you see all of those bodies burning and you think that that person is insane, that seems like a little bit of a jump. But he did leave the community, so maybe there is a little bit more to that, right? But what we don't know is that as Spike is losing his trust in his father and he's realizing that there is a doctor on the mainland, he is plotting to bring his mother there to go see the doctor on his own with no help. I would honestly say that the moment that the dad walks away and punches the wall like that, that's the end of Act 1, in my opinion. Because that shows that they have totally lost any relationship that they had of protected and protector. And now Spike is in the role of protector, but he's protecting his mom. And then we explore what that means on the mainland in Act 2. Yes, that is also when we start to get more of this human horror. I was thinking that we were going to be visiting some of the problems with this cult, but I think that, really at the end of the day, it is a beautiful community that has a dark side, and it is not necessarily, we'll see what happens in the sequel, because we have been promised a sequel in January, but it's not necessarily the kind of darkness that I would have liked to seen. I did hear this in an interview, and I actually agree that this movie is kind of giving folk horror, and that's definitely the vibe that I was getting from that community, was that it had a folk horror vibe, because, I mean, you have to in an environment like that when you're regressing in time like that. it's not necessarily that they are trying to be creepy. It's just that we associate that so much with creepiness, right? And of course, like they're going to school and they're learning how to be archers, and they have this illusion that they're going to be able to infinitely protect themselves. And in reality, what you see when you go to the mainland is that there's really not a lot of resources. The only thing they find on their mission is a frisbee. And like, yes, that's cool, but so many of those places have been picked clean. And there are just so many places that you can't go with just one or two people that you would need an entire team for. So it's really interesting. I'm so excited to see what they do in part 2 with that community. But what we will do when we go into the video for Act 2 is we are going to leave this community behind and take Mama Isla to the mainland. Thanks for watching.